Please welcome President of the Heritage Foundation and Heritage Action, Dr. Kevin Roberts.
Thank you. Welcome to the Heritage Foundation. It's always good to bring friends together here in Washington, and everything in Washington these days seems to be urgent, particularly when you go to Capitol. But I would argue there's nothing more urgent for American society than our topic today. That urgency is because all of American society, including the conservative movement, has been late to recognize the true threat technology poses to our children's development, body, mind, and soul. Digital dependency is making our children's bodies weaker, their imaginations wither, and their souls restless and corrupted. And digital dependency is not an accident. Big tech is actively working to colonize and commodify American childhood. Transhumanist technologists reject natural limits, and they're all too happy to turn our kids into lab rats for their experiments. They want a generation glued to screens, easy to track, easy to sell, and easy to control. What they call innovation is really an attempt to replace parents, teachers, and faith with machines, data, and control. This can no longer be ignored nor excused. It is robbing our young people of the wonder, the virtue, and the discipline that make life meaningful. As parents, we're charged with raising virtuous citizens. As policymakers, we have a duty to help parents fulfill that charge. At Wyoming Catholic College, where I was honored to serve as president, we expressed that mission this way. Outdoor education renews wonder, the root of all learning. It strengthens the imagination and the senses, the indispensable supports of every mental endeavor. It cultivates virtue, the mind's compass, and the wellspring of happiness. Screen addiction does the opposite. It destroys wonder, dulls the imagination, numbs the senses, and undermines the virtues. It's why, since its inception, Wyoming Catholic College has disallowed cell phones on its campus. The fruit of that is when you walk onto campus and students and faculty alike look you in the eye, know how to have conversations with you, are joyful, and after the first semester when the students have to turn in the phones and they lament that, by the second semester, or the third semester, really, the fall of their second year, they're anxiously wanting to give it to the college because they're ready to get rid of this thing after they've had it all summer. I know I'm preaching to the choir. Many of you in this room were among the first to warn of the threat that screens and new technologies present to our children. What others saw as a cultural shift, many of you rightly understood to be the beginning of a societal crisis. No one has sounded that alarm more powerfully than our very distinguished guest, Dr. Jonathan Haidt. His remarkable book, truly remarkable, one of the most important in the modern era, The Anxious Generation, How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness, has awakened America and the world to this danger. I also know that Dr. Haidt has written openly about how, in the course of working on The Righteous Mind, he encountered conservative thinkers such as Edmund Burke, and that encounter led him to question some long-time assumptions, and in the end, to cease identifying politically as a liberal. Dr. Haidt, I know we may not agree on every issue, but I want to tell you, you're always welcome here at Heritage. We believe your work is making an invaluable contribution to the republic we all cherish. And I hope our collaboration on this issue will communicate to the whole country that protecting the most vulnerable in society, especially children, is a civilizational challenge, not a partisan one. After Jonathan's remarks, he'll join Dr. Jay Richards, my friend and colleague, the director of Heritage's DeVos Center for Human Flourishing, for a fireside chat and Q&A. I know that Jonathan, Jay, all of you are fighting the good fight on behalf of future generations of Americans. So today I'll close with just two things. First, thank you for your courage, for your leadership, your willingness to confront this challenge head on. And second, never give up. Our enemies are powerful, but it's not too late to save the rising generation from the harms of technology. At Heritage, we're standing shoulder to shoulder with you, working to make our families stronger, our children happier, and our nation healthier. God bless you, and know that in the fight, we are with you every day. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Jonathan Haidt.
Well, thank you so much. I'm here to talk to you about one of the last remaining bipartisan issues in our country, because Democrats have children and Republicans have children, and everybody sees this happening. And so I speak to groups everywhere on the left and the right, wherever I can reach people who care about kids. But I'm excited to speak here for two reasons. The first is that conservatives come to this question sensitized to a range of social effects that a lot of other people don't seem to get. And I think Dr. Roberts' introduction was one of the best introductions I've had, because it laid out, this isn't just about mental illness or test scores. This is about, what did he say, body, mind, and soul are being sucked out, are being damaged. And this is about citizenship, and this is about the virtues of a democratic republic. So I'm really excited for that reason to speak to this audience. The second reason is that you guys are in charge. Like, you know, at the moment, the Republicans and the conservative movement, you can actually make change. And I want to show you, not just that we have to make change quickly, but that it actually is happening, and it can be done quickly for very little money for most of it. So I'm going to present to you a gigantic problem that we can actually solve. So let's go. So a metaphor that I want to give you is about the way that trees grow. And here you see a tree that grew up behind a Civil War era tombstone. And because the tombstone was always there, the tree grew around it. And now I want to show you a photo of an actual Gen Z brain, which I asked Midjourney to make for me. But the point is, if young people, if people born after 1995, that is Gen Z, if their brains were developing and the phone was always there, then the brain is going to grow around the phone. And that, I think, is what's happened. And I hope you guys can see me there. I'll just go like that to mean advance to the next slide. OK. And then I'll have to do it like a lot. So you have to, OK. So my book is a tragedy in 2 acts. What? Try this? OK. It's a tragedy in 2 acts. So there we go. In Act 1, we lost the play-based childhood. We freaked out about child abduction. We stopped letting our kids out. All the older people here played outside after school and on weekends, learned the skills of independence, learned the skills of self-governance. Preparation for democracy happens on the playground. You have to legislate, litigate. You have to do all those things to keep the game going. And in the 90s, we said, too dangerous. Let's always have you supervised. Act 2 is the more dramatic one that I'll be focusing on. And that is the sudden arrival of the phone-based childhood. I'll walk you through exactly the timing, but younger people here in the audience, you went through this. You saw all of this happen while you were teenagers or in puberty. I can summarize the whole book by saying that we have overprotected our children in the real world, and we've underprotected them online. We have to reverse both mistakes. So this is a summary of what I'll go through just very briefly. I'll start with the mental illness, because that's where we have the best data. That's where this whole thing started, where we first noticed something is terribly, terribly wrong. So this graph shows the percentage when college students go into the mental health center, or rather I should say, what percentage of college students across the country have which problems. And in all the graphs I'm going to show you, there's no trend before 2010. And then this happens. The rates go way, way up, especially for girls, as you'll see on the next slide. It's not just that young people say they're more depressed, it's that their behavior changes as well. So the CDC tracks why people go into hospitals, and so there's a category for non-fatal self-injury. And the rates for 10 to 14-year-old girls, 10 to 14-year-olds used to be extremely low out of 100,000 kids that age. And then we hit this key period, and that happens. 10 to 14-year-old girls did not used to cut themselves in 2010, but by 2015, 2020, they were cutting themselves. And it's the same for suicide. There's no real trend before 2010, 2012, and then it goes way up and very, very sharp for girls, although boys end up with more more deaths because they tend to use lethal methods, a gun or a tall building. And it was when I realized around 2021, 22, that it wasn't just us. Because, what went wrong in 2012? You can blame it on Obama if you want. Whatever it is, say something. But if it's happening everywhere at the same time, what could that be? And just one dramatic slide from the UK, self-harm data for British teen girls, same thing. It's as though somebody turned on a switch in 2012 and girls around the Western world started cutting themselves and being brought to hospitals. Now, why? Why is this happening? The story that I tell here is the only story out there. No one, I have critics who say that I'm overinterpreting the evidence, but they don't come out and say, we think it was something else. Nobody else can even offer an explanation for why this happened around the world in 2012. If it was 2009 or even 2010, you could say global financial crisis. But things were getting better by 2012. The way to understand it is this. If you were born in 1990, raise your hand if you were born right in 1990 or around there. We must have some millennials here. Okay, so you millennials, just call it out. What kind of phone is that? The Razor, right? You guys seem to love that thing, like it was your lifeline. And all you could do with it was call and text, right? And Snake, right? The game Snake. So, but that's it. That's all it did. So it was a tool that you used. There was no front-facing camera, no internet, no Instagram, none of that. So if you're born in 1990, you started puberty around 2002, let's say, and you're done with puberty around 2006. Sometime in there, you went through puberty. That's why you're okay on average. The millennials have better mental health than Gen X. They're actually more intelligent than Gen X. The highest human IQ was achieved with the millennials, and now it's actually going downhill. If you were born 10 years later, suppose you were born in the year 2000, now you're Gen Z, your puberty was entirely different. You turned 12 in 2012, and that's the year that Americans flipped from mostly having flip phones to mostly having smartphones. So your first phone was probably an iPhone that you got in 7th or 8th grade. It had social media on it. You went through puberty, posting, swiping, comparing, being advertised to, being interrupted all day long. You were a pawn in the attention economy. Actually, can you see, is this chair blocking people? Should I move? Yeah, why don't I'll just pull it aside. All right, but the point is it's a completely different puberty, and I really want you to keep your eye on puberty. Puberty is such an important developmental time when the brain is changing very, very rapidly, and the environment is guiding it. And what's the environment? Beginning in 2012, it's Instagram, and then it becomes TikTok. This is what childhood used to look like. And those of you who, I know some of you recognize, in the 80s, if you're out with your friends and you find an extraterrestrial, you don't have to go tell adults. You can have all kinds of adventures. Like, we had that kind of independence back in the 70s and 80s. But childhood now is not like that. Childhood now is very solitary. Because if you're a boy, you can't go over to your friend's house. What are you going to do? You can't play with them. You have to go to your house so that you have your control, your avatar, and then you can play with your friends. So our kids are so lonely. They're so isolated because of these technologies that were sold to us as connecting them. I can show you the Great Rewiring in a single graph. This is the American time use study of young people and adults. How many minutes a day do Americans spend with their friends outside of work and school, just hanging out with your friends? All the lower lines are the older ages. People with jobs and marriages, they're not hanging out with their friends. 15 to 24-year-olds used to spend more than 2 hours a day with their friends. That's what you did when you had free time. And then it plummets. It plummets. And notice this data point here was 2020, COVID. And you can see COVID made everybody else bend down. It accelerated that. But look at the youngest group. 2018 to 2019, COVID comes in, doesn't accelerate it. It just continues. The point is that Gen Z began to social distance as soon as they got their iPhones. And by 2019, they were almost done. So COVID just finished the job. All right, so now I want to tell you about what I now think is an even bigger damage, an even more consequential. I mean, to say that a third of our kids are suffering and are cutting themselves is horrendous, but this might even be bigger. The destruction of the human capacity to pay attention and to think. So 2 years ago, Derek Thompson wrote an article in The Atlantic because test scores were beginning to come in from the post-COVID era. And here we see the National Assessment of Education progress. And it shows that America made progress in raising the absolute level of performance of our students. Very slow, these are not big increases, but it's a slow, steady increase from 1971 through 2012. And then COVID happens, and the first post-COVID data comes out, the 2023 data, and you can see a big drop. And the education world says, oh my God, look at this big drop. Look what COVID did. You know, maybe it wasn't such a good idea to close the schools for a couple of years. But if it's caused by COVID, then it will bounce back. It'll come back, people thought. Well, let's look at the 2024 data. This is the same test, the NAEP, broken up. First, let's just look at the top, the kids who score highest. For them, the COVID story makes sense. Their drop doesn't begin until COVID, and then in 2024, they're beginning to recover. All good, right? Now look at the bottom half, the bottom 50% of the country on these test scores. What happened to them? There's no sign of COVID there. Their decline began in 2015. As soon as they had phones in their pockets and Chromebooks on their desks, they started watching TikTok and porn and video games all day long during class. They stopped learning. And after COVID, no bounce. It just keeps going down. This is where we're headed. Half of our country is dropping and dropping and dropping. And think, here at Heritage, I know you do a lot of thinking about education, education policy, how should we be spending our money, all the money we've spent on education, all the gains we have from 50 years are now gone. We're back to 1971, all gone up in smoke. But I think we can get it all back pretty quickly, and I'll come to that. Oh, the same thing with reading scores and different grades, the exact same pattern. And this is what really freaked me out when I discovered that it wasn't just us. As I showed you, the mental illness is around the world. So are the test declines. So this is PISA, which is the 35 countries, 15-year-olds take these performance exams. No trend before 2010. We get into the Great Rewiring, and around the world, humans know less. Human beings are learning less because their consciousness is hijacked. Our kids get many hundreds of interruptions a day. They get more than 100, on average, more than 100 during school hours. They've got their phones in their pockets. My students at NYU, the great majority of them, they get a notification every time they get an email because culturally they've been conditioned to not want to miss anything. I don't want to miss anything. And if you don't miss anything, that means you're never fully present for anything. And I work with them. It's like, please, shut it off right now. Take out your phone. I have a phone-free policy. Pull out your phone. Shut that off now. We've got to help them get their attention back. And in talking with my students, I teach at NYU Stern. I teach a course called Flourishing. We were talking about this article about college students are having trouble reading books, much more trouble than they used to. As one of my students said, I open a book, I read a sentence, I get bored, I go to TikTok. It's always there, and it's always more interesting than a book or a professor. More data on this. This is a study of high school seniors going back to the 70s, although 1990 in this case. How often do you have trouble thinking or concentrating? You see a slight increase up to 2010. How often do you have trouble learning new things? No increase at all up to 2010. And then this happens. All of a sudden, our young people are saying, I can't think. I can't think anymore. It's hard to learn. Again, this is a national disaster. And again, I keep saying, and this is what really freaked me out, because like every week there's a new thing that freaks me out about how big this is. This is data from an OECD study, includes the US. This is adults, this is not kids. This is people who went through puberty in the before time. And what the light blue line is functional illiteracy. And I looked at some of the questions. You read 3 paragraphs. One is about bread versus crackers. And then you answer 3 questions, simple questions. What % of Americans cannot do that? And the answer is that it used to be around 17% were functionally illiterate, or down to 15% in 2010. And then we enter the Great Rewiring, and it almost doubles. And this is going on around the world. Even we, and I'm sure many of you notice this, it's just harder to do anything because we're always interrupted and distracted. The journalist who wrote this, he said, we seem to be witnessing not just the decline of reading, but a broader erosion in the human capacity for mental focus and application. Now, very briefly, we think about social media and girls especially, and that was clear when I started the book. I didn't know what the boys' story was when I started writing the book. There are so many different pathways by which girls are more vulnerable to social media. They know more about the social network, they care more about it. They're more easily lured into anything that promises social information, and then they're drawn in and locked into constant social comparison, sexual predation. All sorts of terrible things happen to girls when they are spending hours a day on Instagram, Snapchat, and these platforms. The boys' story was harder to figure out, and I didn't know it when I started the book, but I think we got it. The boys' story, keep your eye on dopamine. Raise your hand if you have a son born after 1995. How many of you have a boy born after 1995? Think about all of the companies that are trying to give your boy quick pleasure. It's quick pleasure that gives you dopamine that makes you do something over and over again. What you want is slow pleasure. You're building a treehouse, you make progress, you feel good about it. That's what you want, because dopamine isn't just reinforcement. Dopamine is actually motivation. Dopamine makes you want to do things. And so what happens, though, is that we've said open season on our boys for Silicon Valley. They can compete to see who can grab every boy's attention. It begins with the video games, and they're in a brutal conflict against each other to be the more addictive site, to keep the boys on their site. And then it moves on to porn, where there's no age limit of any kind. There's vaping, there's marijuana pens, there are chemical addictions being pushed on the kids. When they enter their teen years, now they're going to start sports betting. You don't have to be 21. There's all kinds of ways that boys find to be betting real money on games, and not just like who's going to win, but every pitch. So it's insane what we're doing to boys and their relationships and their pastimes and their enjoyment of sports. And even investing is gamified. The more you play, the more you're going to lose. So think about, conservatives are really, I think, more sensitive about the importance of marriage and the decline of marriage. It's already declining. What is going to happen in 10 or 20 years when young women are looking for a man to marry, and most of the men, they're less likely to have finished school or be able to hold down a job or have not gone bankrupt? Whenever sports betting is legalized, bankruptcies go up, mostly for young men. We are ruining our young men, and as my friend Richard Reeves says, a world of floundering men is unlikely to be a world of flourishing women. One more thing I'm very excited to talk with you here about, spiritual degradation. So my first book was called The Happiness Hypothesis, and I surveyed ancient wisdom east and west and took out the psychological statements. Now, I'm Jewish, I'm not a believer, I'm not a religious person, but I came to see that religion is part of what makes us human. It was essential for the creation of large-scale societies. We couldn't have had large-scale societies without religion to hold us together. Peace, prosperity, religion creates so much social capital. And so in all the things that the ancients told us to do, this is common across many religions, all of these things, when our kids are being raised on phones, they're not doing any of them. Jesus tells us, be slow to anger, quick to forgive, judge not lest ye be judged. But what happens on social media? As soon as you're on social media, what's the rule? Judge now, you better judge now, because if you don't judge now, in 5 minutes, we're judging you for not judging her. So this really messes up moral development, spiritual development, and spiritual communities. I've done a number of Christian podcasts. Pastors are finding the audience is distracted. You go to your phone for your Bible verse. Oh, there's a text coming in. So you have to be present, especially for being part of a religious congregation, for having spiritual experiences. You must be present. And these phones devastate presence. I can show you the depths of our spiritual crisis in a single graph. This is the saddest graph in the book. That survey of high school seniors monitoring the future, one of the items on it is life often feels meaningless. Do you agree or disagree on a 5-point scale? And it's nice to see that only about 17% of our boys and girls agree that their life feels meaningless. That's what it was when the millennials were in high school in 1991, or that's the end of Gen X. But all of that data, those are millennials. And things are actually getting a little better. They're getting a little less likely to agree with it. And then we enter the Great Rewiring, and all of a sudden it doubles. Gen Z comes into the data set. They go through puberty on Instagram and then later TikTok, and they agree, yeah, my life feels useless, because it is useless. If all you're doing is consuming content programmed by algorithms in Silicon Valley, your life is useless. You're just a pod being sucked dry of attention. That's a useless life. We've got to stop it. We've got to stop this from happening. there's a wonderful Gen Z poet, it's so powerful. You can find it on my Substack, After Babel, or you can just look up her name, Corey Jane. She says, "The phone is the medicine that's making our souls die. I know it's poison, but I drink anyway. Our parents were right, it was the damn phones." So this spiritual language, you need, again, I'm not a religious person, but I found to write this chapter, to write this book, to understand, I had to turn to religion to understand what are we losing, what are we missing, what do we need to regain to have a healthy society with healthy children. So that is the end of the super depressing, frightening part. I hope I've got your attention, okay? Guess what? We can reverse this. We are reversing it. Here's how it goes. I'm a social psychologist, which means I focus on how do we influence each other when we're always taking our values, our behaviors, always influenced by what others are doing. And every parent in the room of a teenager knows the moment when your kid came to you and said, "Mom, Dad, I need a phone. I need a phone. Everyone else has one. They're making fun of me. I'm the only one who's left out." That's a social trap. That's social pressure. And so what I realized by the end of the book, I realized I can't give 50 suggestions for what to do. I have to have a few that we can do at the same time to break out of this, because we're stuck in a collective action trap, but the way out is collective action. So here it is. The first norm is no smartphones before high school. Let's just set that as the target. I mean, really, it could be later, but my goal isn't what's the best age. It's what's the highest age when we could actually get a norm, because it only matters if we get a norm that most parents can lock onto, and then we get this stuff out of middle school. Clear this all out of elementary and middle school. And it's working. Parents are taking all kinds of pledges, wait until 8, smartphone-free childhood. These are really good organizations. You sign a pledge, and then as soon as people in your school also have signed, you have a community, you're all set. Second norm, no social media before 16. We have to come to see that talking with anonymous men from around the world, some of whom want sex from you, some want money, some want both, not a child-friendly activity. But that's what it is. All these sites are unverified. Anyone can go on. Now, increasingly, it's going to be bots. Oh my God, I gave a talk earlier today, and one father said, I can't believe I'm going to say this sentence. He said, yes, my 8-year-old was targeted by a bot that attacked her while she was watching a cartoon, and it asked her like what she was wearing, and the conversation evolved to where it said that it wanted to have sex with her. How do you even wrap your head around the fact that this is now part of American childhood? So how about just no? How about just we say there are, let's just say 16 is a minimum age at which you can make decisions. But before then, you need protections. And it's happening. Governor DeSantis was the first state to raise the age to 16. It's being held up in court, so it hasn't been implemented yet. But Australia did it nationally, and it's going to kick in on December 10th. And a lot of countries want to follow suit. A lot of states want to follow suit. So again, this is the second norm. We're making amazing progress just in the last 12 to 15 months. Third norm, this is my favorite because this is the one that's giving us these incredible stories. We have teachers dancing in the hallways because we have students talking in the hallways. This is what you always hear. They all say, laughter in the hallways. There's a big drop in discipline problems, because why would you lure someone into the bathroom for an ambush where you beat the hell out of them if you can't take a video and post it? There's really not a lot of reason. And so as soon as schools go phone free for the day, violence drops. There's no need for it. I think let's see if this plays. This is a wonderful 1-minute video.
My school, my state, banned the phones. Banned the phones. Today, all of my students, 100% of them, took notes in my class, did their assignment, asked for help when they got stuck, and turned it in. And then when they were done, they talked to each other. Was it this easy the whole time? I have been pulling my hair out for like 8 years. Has it been this easy of a solution the whole time?
That's my favorite part. They're like, and you're not going to believe this, but they talked. to each other. Like, this was a revelation that it was possible to get young people to talk to each other in class. So this policy costs essentially nothing. It's bipartisan. 19 states have done it the right way, which is bell to bell. About 15 to 18 have done something else, which is mostly just in class time. If your kid goes to a school where they can't have their phone in class, but they can text you in between classes, guaranteed they're on their phone every moment between classes and at lunch. So your state did it wrong, your kids are not getting the benefit, and you should push for change. It has to be bell to bell to get the huge benefits that we're seeing. The final norm is more independence, free play, and responsibility in the real world, because this isn't about take away this, take away this. This is about restore childhood, reclaim childhood. Give the kids a fun childhood the way most of us older people had, and it's working. Go to letgrow.org, an organization I co-founded with Lenore Skenazy to help communities and schools give more outdoor play, more free play, more excitement. So let me just zoom in just a little bit to conclude on what a policy-oriented think tank and community can do. And again, this is why I'm really pleased to be here at Heritage. Ronald Reagan created the modern Republican Party and the conservative movement, bringing in the evangelicals, and a pillar of that was family values, that the Republicans were going to stand for family values and push back against the threats. And certainly in Dr. Roberts' introduction, that was a great listing of the threats that are coming to the family. I came across this bit of text recently. Does anyone recognize it? Consider our approach to big tech. These companies prey on children. They're addicting other people's children. These platforms fuel mental illness to fray children's bonds with their parents and siblings. Federal policy cannot allow this industrial-scale child abuse to continue. Who wrote that? Where's that from? Heritage Foundation. This is Project 2025. So, so you guys understand, you have, I think, a very correct understanding of the predatory nature of this industry, which until now has never been held responsible. Thousands of children are dead that would not have been dead. Hundreds of thousands have depression, anxiety, eating disorders that would not have had it. There's never been an industry with such a body count among children. And as far as I know, they've never paid a penny. They have never been held accountable. There are a lot of lawsuits, but they haven't lost yet because the laws are such that they're able to worm out of it. And so this, again, is a tragedy that has to be fixed. Part of it has to be legislation and jurisprudence. And I hope that, and Heritage is a voice for doing that. I'm really pleased to say and to see that. This is also the biggest political winner out there because parents all over are desperate for this. A study I did with the Harris poll, we asked American parents of Gen Z about all these things. I wish that this had never been invented. So for TikTok, 62% of American parents of Gen Z said, I wish this just never existed. The world would be a better place for my child if this was never born. And as you see, TikTok, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, they're up there with alcohol. They're a little below porn, but they're up there with alcohol. Whereas like bicycles, 9%. Lots of kids get hurt on a bicycle, right? Lots of kids get hurt on a bicycle, but this is part of growing up. Parents don't regret that their kids had bicycles. They really regret that their kids had TikTok, Instagram, and Snapchat. And it's getting worse. I mean, if we don't get on this now about social media, a steamroller is coming for our kids. It's already beginning to crush them. This was just so stunning to me. These chatbots are allowed to talk about sex with your children. They can have sexual fantasies with your children. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal. Mark Zuckerberg specifically gave the order at Meta to loosen up the guardrails. And here is a sentence that was allowed. It gives examples of where the line is. And so if a chatbot is talking to an 8-year-old, it is allowed to engage in romantic or sensual conversations, such as telling a shirtless 8-year-old that, quote, every inch of you is a masterpiece. That was in the Meta document. They wrote that as a guideline to say what's okay. This is insane that we let this company get to our children. And it just keeps going on. So I was preparing this talk a couple days ago. Yesterday, I got this headline. Okay, ChatGPT is causing thousands, hundreds of thousands of adults to have psychotic episodes. How about we work this into childhood? How about we push it into every elementary school classroom? What could go wrong? So, of course, parents should have the ultimate responsibility. Parents need to be able to decide how to raise their own children. But anyone raising kids today knows we can't do it. The world that we're trying to raise our kids in makes it so hard to raise kids the way we want, because the wealthiest, most powerful companies in history, freed from all accountability. There is no other industry that can hurt children with absolute impunity other than this one, and they do, over and over again. We have schools that are pushing ed tech, in part because they're pushed by the companies. Our daughters have long been exposed to sexual predation. Now, of course you tell them, don't ever send a naked photo of yourself. Too late. If there's a photo, the boys in their class can make it a porn photo or a porn video. Online gambling is destroying our sons' futures. And chatbots, nobody knows how they work. They're not programmed, they're grown. This is a phrase they use. A chatbot is, or an AI, an LLM, is grown in the lab. They're very much like alien intelligences. And if aliens came down to Earth tomorrow, and we didn't really understand who they were, would we say, children, go off and play with the aliens? We don't know who they are, but go off and play with them. But that's what we're doing. So this is a huge electoral winner. Any group, any party that gets on this, you're going to have huge support from the whole country and the whole world. So we're here to help you. I have my policy team is here with me. Casey, where's Casey Mock? Oh, Casey in the front here. And Alexa Arnold is running the movement. Please come talk to them afterwards. We have model bills for you. We're here to help. Email us at policy@anxiousgeneration.com. So this is my presentation to you. I hope I've shown you that there is damage happening at a level beyond comprehension. But with collective action, and especially bipartisan, across the whole country, the whole world, we actually can solve this problem. So I hope you'll help us. I hope you'll support us. I hope you'll join the movement to reclaim childhood. And here is where you can go for more information. And now I look forward to talking with Jay and getting your questions. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, you're supposed to pick that one. Yeah, I'll pick this one.
While we move the furniture here.
Yep.
First of all, John, it is so great to have you here. It's your book, The Anxious Generation, is one of those books. We were actually at a large Heritage Foundation conference in California when I was listening to it on the audiobook in the gym in the mornings, listening to it, and was just absolutely obnoxious telling people about it as I was going through the sort of chapters. And a lot of us have read it and thought a lot about it. So, honestly, some of the things I wanted to ask you actually were in your presentation. Okay. So I'll just drill down a little bit. And so I'm trying to think, because I can hear the sort of, what I'm going to call the kind of libertarian objections to this stuff sort of in my head. And, the sort of, I guess, the devil's advocate. And so somebody can say, well, look, technological revolutions have been happening for all of human history. I mean, at some point, we invented fire and switched from eating raw to cooked food, right? There was the wheel. Socrates complained in one of Plato's dialogues about the written language because it would cause people to lose their memories. The agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, and then all these things that at least seem like they sort of come together in screens and social media. But we had phones, right? We've had those, in some form for a century. We had screens. People had TVs. People had computers. Why do you think this is different and not just, okay, this is something that it's disruptive, but we will adapt to it given time?
That's right. So that is the main argument used against me. This is just one more moral panic like all the previous ones. And in terms of the public reaction, it is similar. And I am fomenting, we can call it moral panic, but it's only panic if it's unjustified. So the question is this really hurting kids? Or am I ringing an alarm bell that has to be rung? And I should give Jean Twenge credit for ringing it first in 2017. And there's a number of differences. The first is that television sat there and you watched it. You couldn't take it with you to school. You couldn't take it outside. You couldn't take it to the bathroom. You couldn't take it in the elevator. Now we have something that has our kids all the time. Second, there's no previous moral panic when the kids said, we hate this, liberate us from it. We can't, we're trapped. But this one they do. Yeah. So this one, the kids say they're trapped. They wish they could get up, but they can't because then they'll be alone. So this is the social dynamics are different. And the third is that let's look at how we got out of these previous technological problems. So when the automobile was invented and was beginning to spread, did people say, well, technology's here to stay. What are you going to do? Of course 8-year-olds are driving, and there are no seat belts, and they can't see over the windshield. And when they get in an accident, the glass shatters and blinds them. But what are you going to do? It's always been like this. How about we have a minimum age for driving? And if you're a company making tons of money from selling cars, how about there have to be some minimum safety features? That's the way we adapt.
Right.
And so, yes, the technology is here to stay. I think overall it's doing more harm than good to adults, but I share a lot of libertarian sentiments. I'm not out here telling adults, you should stop doing things. But I am out here as a parent and as a citizen saying, companies, you better stop doing this to our kids, because kids are different than adults.
Yes.
So I think this is different.
And you briefly mentioned this idea of risky play. You have this great line in the book, and you said we're overprotective when it comes to the real world, and we're underprotective when it comes to the virtual world. And I think this is absolutely a crucial dynamic. I mean, I think of myself, who had a daughter who happened to go to a school the last 2 years that you had to put the phone away. And I can remember thinking, well, but what if there's a shooter that comes into the school? And I think this is what is happening in the minds of parents at this age, is that, yeah, it seems like that'd be a good idea, all things being equal, but the world is such a dangerous place. How do you respond?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, there's a lot of, so I did a lot of research. I'm a social psychologist, but I just love reading widely across psychology and social sciences. And one of the coolest ideas that I covered in the book is the idea that risky play is necessary for neural development. That there's a reason why when kids learn to skateboard, they then start skateboarding downstairs, they take risks. When they climb a tree, they go higher. You have to get to the point where you're scared. That's a feature, not a bug. And that's how you learn what you can do, and that's how you extend your abilities. And so when kids are on a playground, the playgrounds that you and I grew up on, you could get hurt. Like, you could fall off the swings. Okay, anybody remembers the jungle gym with the metal bars? Do you remember the feeling on your chin? Raise your hand if you remember the feeling on your chin when you slip and you hit your chin, okay? So it's bad to hit your chin, but you need to hit your chin a couple times in order to that's how we learn, is through those failures, those relatively low risk failures. And so this research shows that risky play has anti-phobic effects. Kids who are allowed to take risks, they learn how to not get hurt, and then they're less anxious. But what we've done is we said, I don't want you to get hurt. On some playgrounds, the rules say you can't have any tree roots anywhere, because God forbid hominid children should run through a forest. I mean, that would be terrible. So if we remove risk, we're not protecting our kids, we're making them less safe.
Well, and so you mentioned in the book, I mean, I don't know that people really realize this, but in many ways, violent crime, kids being abducted, it's actually much safer now than it was a few decades ago. I don't know that's processes for most people.
That's right. And so actually this brings up what we can call the third act of the tragedy. Because I laid this all out. Act 1, we lose the play-based childhood. And only when we were almost done with the book did we realize, okay, why did we lose the play-based childhood? What happened in the 90s and late 80s? And the answer is Robert Putnam. If you know Robert Putnam's book, Bowling Alone, or if you've heard the thesis. In the post-war American world, everyone knew their neighbors. It goes back longer than that, but post-war America really was, from a social capital point of view, like the best we'd ever been. People had gone through the war together. They knew their neighbors. They knew their community. They trusted institutions. So you could let kids out. And I grew up in Scarsdale, New York, and we were all riding around on bicycles. And if you wiped out and somebody got hurt, you could just knock on a door and say, "Can you call his mom?" Like, people would help. But Putnam describes how we stop knowing our neighbors, we stop trusting them, and when we can't be raising kids in a community, when it's every family for themselves, it all falls on the mother, and the mother will be judged. If that kid is seen outside, the mother could literally be sent to jail. That happened in Georgia last year. Literally sent to jail because her 10-year-old walked to a store. Wow. So we have to change this legislatively and culturally.
So say a little bit about Taleb's idea of anti-fragility, which you talk about in the book. It's absolutely crucial to get this.
Yeah, that helps on this. My previous book was called The Coddling of the American Mind, and it was about what I saw happening on university campuses. I wrote it with my friend Greg Lukianoff, who's the president of the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, so I'm very sensitive to the free speech issues around all of this. And the key idea, one of the key ideas we drew on in that book, so we knew that something was going wrong with kids born after 1995. We saw that on college campuses by 2015. And we were pretty confident that part of it was the overprotection. We didn't know about the technology back then. We didn't have the evidence then. So we focused on the overprotection. The key idea is from this kind of wild, eccentric NYU professor, Nassim Taleb, who wrote the book The Black Swan. He coined the term anti-fragile. Some things are fragile. You don't give a kid, a toddler, a wine glass because it'll break. Nothing good happens. We give them a sippy cup, which is plastic. And if they drops it, it doesn't break, but it doesn't get better. And Taleb wanted to know, what's the word for things that get better when you drop them? And there is no word in English. It's not resilient. So we had to make up the word anti-fragile. An anti-fragile system is like a child that gets better when it runs around and falls. It gets better when it tries to use the stove and it burns itself once and then never does it again. So we have to have those small things in order to make us, to prepare us for the big things. That's what anti-fragility is, and we've lost sight of that.
Like the immune system is the sort of
Yes.
obvious example, right? If
Immune system
if
is
you
perfect.
just absolutely put a child in a sterile environment, that's a disaster.
That's
Of course, if you constantly overexpose them, it's a disaster. There's some sweet spot in the middle.
Exactly. That's right, and that's why peanut allergies have been going up. The cause of the rise of peanut allergies is our efforts to avoid peanut allergies.
Alas. So I want you to speculate here a little bit, but I think there's the message in the medium. And I think the thing that was intuitively plausible to people, certainly to conservatives, but I think almost everyone that's a parent, is we think a lot about the messages. We think about the predators, we think about the porn, we think about the toxic ideas that kids get exposed to, or the sort of nasty messages in comparing that happens with young girls, especially on Instagram. What about the medium itself, about the technology itself? Do you have a sense that that's a large part of what we're dealing with?
Yes, and actually it's good that you put it that way, because your opening question here was something about the libertarian objections.
Yes.
Let's deal with those directly. Libertarians generally don't trust government. They certainly don't trust government to be the arbiters of who can say what. And there's certainly good historical and recent historical reasons to be very wary of that. And what I found, once I really got into this issue about the problems with technology, people assume that I'm saying, oh, regulation, you mean you want the government to decide who gets to say what? Like, no, I don't think about that. I don't think about content very much. All the action, most of the action is in the design. So I understand why Meta is not responsible if somebody puts up a video about how to kill yourself. That they shouldn't be sued just because it exists. But why did they make an algorithm that will preferentially send that to my child if my child shows any interest in mental health? And why does she get deluged by it? And why do they have all kinds of things to keep her on far longer than she wants to keep on? This is defective product design done to addict children. They should be held responsible. Has nothing to do with left or right, nothing to do with censorship. So I think we all focus on design, then all of us, liberal, conservative, and libertarian, can say, you're making a dangerous product. You should be sued to oblivion.
So you're a social scientist, and so I know, I can imagine having written this book, there's going to be some critics out there, right? And so, I think the kind of general objection is, okay, so there's sort of social pathologies and things that seem to follow this technology, but that's correlation. How do we prove causation? And of course, people that say that know anything about this should realize we're not going to have randomized controlled trials, right? We're going to expose these kids to 20 hours a day of the internet, and we're going to isolate these. Right. But how do you respond to the kind of general objection?
I'm so glad you asked that, because this is really important, especially for legislation and litigation. So the basic argument against me is that I don't know the difference between correlation and causation. I show graphs in chapter 1 that this happened, and guess what else happened? At this point, social media was introduced. If that's all I had, I would be guilty as charged. We cannot prove what caused an historical trend, especially in the social sciences. Fine. Now let's look at it from a product safety point of view. The question on parents' mind isn't what happened in 2012. It's, is this product safe for my child, and is there evidence of safety or harm? Let's go through it. Is there evidence of harm? Well, let's ask the people who use it. The kids say it's harming them. Is that evidence? I think so. Let's ask the people who saw the harm happen, the parents and teachers. They say it's harming kids. Is that evidence? I think so. Let's take the companies at their word. We have thousands and thousands of pages of their internal reports and studies. They know they're hurting kids. They're trying to addict them. They say that their products are causing all kinds of defects in personality and mental health. So is a signed confession from the companies about what they're doing, is that evidence of harm? I think so. And now let's get to the academic evidence. There are 4 lines that we're debating about. All 4 lines point to a close association, and 2 of them are causal. One is the correlational studies, which are, the correlations are large enough, they're about as large as most other things in public health. So the correlations are there, it doesn't prove causation. So we do experiments. What do the experiments show? When you get college students to reduce their social media use for at least a week, their levels of depression go down. Those are randomized controlled trials. We have a lot of them, and almost all of them, when you look at depression and you look at more than a week, they all show reductions. So it's kind of case closed at this point. But wait, there's also the longitudinal studies that show the right precedence of order, and there are quasi-experiments that show that when high-speed internet comes to a region of Spain or Canada or Germany, girls especially go into psychiatric care more often in the following years. So we have 7 lines of evidence. I think I understand the difference between correlation and causation.
Absolutely. And absolutely any doctor that gives you an antibiotic, if you break out in hives, well, you're not going to do a randomized control trial. We're going to tell you to stop taking the antibiotic. So, and the biohackers, of course, talk about these N=1 experiments, and it's essentially that. Well, why don't you just change your macros and see what it actually does? And so, in principle, anyone that's not deeply addicted as an adult can test this for themselves.
That's right. And how often do you hear a story or hear someone say, yeah, I got off social media, and boy, did I get depressed. I've never heard that.
That's so true. And so your chapter 8 in the book, which you talked a bit about, it was sort of surprised me when I was reading it, because you yourself, you said, look, I'm not a religious person, and yet you have this chapter about the existential and spiritual void that people feel as, it's not as if, so what you're not saying is, well, people have a spiritual and existential void, they might, but so they turn to this, but that the participation itself, or at least
Causing
the addictive, is actually causing it.
Yeah, no, that's right, I think that's right. So I've been active in the field of positive psychology for a long time. My main work was on moral psychology, moral development, but I got active I was interested in positive moral emotions. So I thought a lot about flourishing. What are the conditions of flourishing? And the formulation I came to in the happiness hypothesis is happiness comes from between. It doesn't come from within you entirely. It doesn't come from getting things in the world. It comes from getting the right kind of embeddedness or connectedness to other people, to work or something productive, and to something larger than yourself. That's my formulation in the book. It's the right kind of between. And every one of those 3 is decimated when kids separate from each other and just consume content. So yes, I believe this is causing a spiritual vacuum, a spiritual starvation. And it was when I was almost done with the book, and it was all about kids, and I was very anchored on what's the evidence. Like, so I'm almost done, and I realized, wait, I've been too focused on just like what I can prove. There's this giant thing happening that I want to express, and I can't prove it. I don't have data on spiritual flourishing. Well, there is some, but so I wrote that chapter, and it was like overdue, and it was like past deadline, but it was very important to me to get that out, and that's my favorite chapter now. I'm so glad that I did it, and I think I expressed something that we're all feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a bit about boys, and I've looked into this myself. So God protected me from gaming because I get motion sickness if I play first-person perspective games for more than about 5 minutes. But not everyone is protected in that way, and I know there's at least people have an impression that there's some redeeming value in certain kind of games, and so I know young men that play, say World of Warcraft or Halo, and there is a social aspect to it in which you can be playing with friends that are in other parts of the country, right? And there's a kind of camaraderie, and there's, I think, an experience of heroism and of bravery that they have in this way together, which is a legitimately bonding experience. Now it's a facsimile, but do you think there's something redemptive there, or what do you think is going on? Because that's a different thing than, say, Instagram.
You're right, it is different. When let's focus on kids, let's say 10 to 14-year-old boys. And so we could not say that this is harming boys the same way that social media is harming girls. It is different. There are there's some evidence of some benefits on cognitive abilities. Certainly there's social. Games are very, very varied. Some of these quest games that are cooperative.
Yes.
So I can't slam video games as much as I can slam social media. But here's the thing that we're learning. We older people, we think of video games as a game that you start and then you play it and then it's over. And when we look at that, there are some problems with them. Some of them are addictive. The violence, it turns out, is, it's not that it's good, but it's the key thing isn't that they're shooting people. So we got kind of confused, focused on the question of the shooting. Is that the problem? Yeah. But here's what we're learning. Video games aren't like that anymore. They're not a consumer product that you buy and own. It's software as a service. And so it's just like social media. So if your kid, raise your hand if your kid's on Roblox. Raise your hand if you know that your child uses Roblox. Okay, not a lot of you, that's good. Because Roblox is not a video game. Roblox is a virtual world environment where strangers, mostly men from around the world, can create whatever kind of game they want, and your kids wander around and they can engage with whatever they want. We did a deep dive on this. We show there's games like Sex with the Teacher, in which you watch a teacher having sex, or you can have sex with your teacher in this game. You can be 7 and you're having sex with a teacher with Roblox characters. There are strip clubs, again, Roblox characters, but you're stripping and simulating sex. 2 days after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, Roblox took down, I think, more than 100 Charlie Kirk shooter games. So it's a sick, sick environment. It's not a video game. And this is just like, well, what are you going to do? You know, we had previous moral panics. Well, let's just adapt to this. Yeah, by shutting it down for children.
That's a super depressing thing to end on, so I'm going to ask you, I mean, are you optimistic? And if so, why are you optimistic?
Yeah, no, I am wildly optimistic, because who would ever have thought that we could have 38 states passing legislation, 19 of them doing it correctly, in a year? Yeah. And so the 19 that blew it, they're going to correct it, and you guys are going to push them to do that. Yep. You know, I've had meetings in Congress. There's a lot of support for this on both sides. So I think, you know, especially if we work with libertarians to work out certain objections, it's all systems go. Absolutely. We all have children. We all see the damage. We all need to protect children. And the amazing thing is we can do it. And this is part of, look, this is part of what Tocqueville said about America, that he said in France, when there's a problem, you need a bridge built, wait for the king to do it. In England, when there's a problem, you wait for the nobles to do it. But in America, he traveled around in the 1830s. In America, they get together, they have they have a group, they have a collection, they come up with papers, and they do it. This is what Americans do, and this is what we're seeing all around the country. So I am actually wildly optimistic.
Wonderful. Jonathan Haidt, everyone. Thank you. Well, we're now having a discussion. So this event is officially co-sponsored by 2 centers. I'm the director of the DeVos Center for Human Flourishing, but also sponsored by the Center on Technology and the Human Person. And I would now like to invite my colleague, Wes Hodges, who is the director of the Technology Center, to come introduce his panelists. Wes.
Thank you very much, Jay. It's very good to see you all and be here. I am delighted to be introducing this accomplished panel, but the first thing I want to say is just a tremendous thank you to Michael Marinaccio, one of our panelists, who is Executive Director of the Center for Responsible Technology, who we wouldn't have this event without them. They've been a sponsor, a partner for this the whole way through. So thank you very much, Michael. So I am going to kick us off by sharing some bios for our panelists, but in the meantime, I would love it if you guys would take the stage so we can transition quickly, get to these questions, and have an excellent conversation following those remarks. So delighted to present this accomplished panel of medical and policy professionals to discuss the harms and deliberate on solutions in this civilizational challenge to save our kids from addiction and tech-generated chronic disease. The first person I'm delighted to be introducing is Dr. Victoria Dunkley. Dr. Dunkley is an integrative child psychiatrist and author of Reset Your Child's Brain, a groundbreaking book on the neurological and behavioral impacts of screen time on children. She has treated hundreds of youth with conditions such as ADHD, anxiety, and depression through her signature electronic fast protocol. Her clinical work and advocacy have made her a national voice on how digital overuse contributes to the child mental health crisis. Victoria, thank you so much for being here. Next, I'm delighted to introduce Jennifer Ghilardi. Jennifer is a senior policy analyst for Restoring American Wellness here at the Heritage Foundation's DeVos Center. She has decades of experience in fitness and nutrition, working for some of the most prominent brands to represent health and wellness initiatives, including Nike, Microsoft, Coca-Cola, and Comcast. Jennifer, delighted that you're on stage with us. And next, I mentioned Michael. Michael serves as executive director of the Center for Responsible Technology. With nearly 15 years in federal politics and 2 decades as a technologist, he leads efforts to promote sensible policy, disrupt screen overuse culture, and advocate for human-centered technology that supports real-world experiences and child development. Thank you again for being here. Next, and finally, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Annie Chestnut-Tudor, who is a policy analyst in our Center for Technology and the Human Person. She focuses on federal and state policy to protect children online, strengthen parental rights, and counter big tech's influence. Annie's research and advocacy equip policymakers with practical solutions to restore digital boundaries and serve families and communities. Annie, thank you for being here. Now, let's get to the questions. All right. Dr. Dunkley, you are up first. Doctor, you are a physician who specializes in this field. Can you help us see this issue through your eyes for a moment? What has your clinical practice taught you about the relationship between screen time and anxiety, depression, or sleep problems in children?
So what I'm seeing and what I've been doing this for 20 years now, focused on the impact of screen time on mental health, is that, first of all, the acuity is super high now. It's very hard to get kids better unless and until the screen aspect is addressed. So clinically, what I see is that even though kids are presenting differently, like some may have attention issues, some may have tics, they might become depressed. A lot of kids come in with mood swings and aggression. Whatever the issue is, the underlying problem is that they're in a state of chronic hyperarousal. So in this kind of like heightened state of arousal all the time. So they're like revved up but exhausted. They're wired and tired. So that, depending on their constitution and how old they are, it presents different ways. So it's confusing. So kids are getting misdiagnosed. They're being put on medication inappropriately. Even if they need medication, they're being put on higher doses or multiple medications that don't work. And then this spills into other areas like school. They're struggling in school. And then the interventions at school don't work. They're very disruptive in the classroom. So then other kids are paying the price. So it all comes down to screens, either directly or indirectly.
I feel like revved up and tired is something that I can relate to as well, and probably most of us. Now, my next question is, would you be able to tell, just from examining a child, if they suffer from electronic screen syndrome? What happens to these addicted kids physiologically?
Well, I can almost always tell only because it's universal. It's kind of the default. I assume that it's happening if they have any screen time at all. And by the way, a lot of these problems happen even if the child is using screens, well below the recommended limits of 1 to 2 hours a day. Some kids, even if they're using just once a week or twice a week, they still have these issues, and we know that it's affecting them because when we take all the screens away, they get better. So I'm sorry, I forgot the original question.
Oh, the question is, can you tell?
So a lot of times, like I mentioned, the presentation varies, but a lot of times the description from the parent is that the child's irritable and they can't focus. They're not motivated, they're defiant, they have trouble getting things done. So they're in this defensive state because they're operating from a more primitive part of the brain. So when you're in that survival state, which is occurring because you're being assaulted by screen stimulation all the time, it's hard to think ahead, it's hard to focus, it's hard to think of another person besides yourself. So, and we know this from the research too, is that empathy is being, you can't be empathic when you're in that defensive state. And we know that, all the way from little kids to young adults now, the empathy scores are dropping. So all of these characteristics, whether it's executive functioning, mood regulation, or empathy, creativity, all of those things have to do with the frontal lobe, and that's what gets shut down when you're overstimulated.
I find that I struggle with truthfulness when I visit the dentist. Do you find that your patients, parents, children, are they being honest with you about their addiction?
goodness, no. I mean,
Are they honest with themselves?
I think I always tell parents too, like lying is a red flag to me because it's a sign that the child is living in an environment where they think the parent doesn't know what they're doing. So whether and I sometimes I see that when they're not even playing video games that much, but just the fact that they're existing in a space where their parent doesn't know what they're doing, it tempts them to lie, and then they start lying in other ways too. But I think most kids, I'm assuming they're gonna start arguing with me that it's not the problem. So we really work more with the parents.
Understood. Thank you. Jennifer, my next question is for you. So the MAHA movement emphasizes root cause health and holistic well-being. How does excessive screen time undermine these goals?
Yes, so thank you for the question. I think one of the biggest things Secretary Kennedy has brought to awareness with the MAHA movement is this shift from looking at the body as a certain part to treat, like a heart or a brain or the gut, and this holistic idea of health and wellness and what it means to be healthy and well in our society. And really what it means to be human. There is a lot of that language within the MAHA movement, which is why it is so powerful and bipartisan, is because it's touching all of us on a very human, holistic level. Everything kind of affects the body, the mind, and as we heard throughout kind of the two conversations previously, the soul. And so the tech affects all of these things as well. So it fits so nicely. And it is, even though it's not really pointed out many times within the MAHA report, there is, I believe, one line on screen time that suggests the Surgeon General will launch an education and awareness initiative on the effect of screens on children and the actions being taken by states to limit screen times at school. So that's the specific policy direction in the second MAHA report. However, they do outline the 4 biggest drivers of chronic health conditions. 1, poor diet. And we can argue that tech affects that because we're kind of just in this mindless numbing of everything, of eating, of the screens. Like we're on our screens and we're eating, and we're not really mindful of anything we're doing. So it does affect diet. 2, chemical exposure. Some people will go down the path of the 5G radiation. So that's a deep hole that people will go into, and we'll kind of gloss over that because that's not really the issue of today's conversation. But 3, over-medicalization, and this really gets into maybe more young adults than children, but this over-medicalization for young adults, particularly women, there's now these websites called Hers and Hims, where all you have to do, you're self-diagnosing. I went on a test case of 1. I went on this Hers website, and it took me less than 15 minutes to diagnose, to tell this website, I'm anxious, I'm depressed. Of course, we all get anxious and depressed from time to time, but now I have an appointment with the doctor that I can go online and they'll be like, here are your SSRIs. Here is your, it's insane how easily we are prescribing drugs to young adults and particularly young women when they're in the middle of forming what could possibly be the most important relationships of their life, which is with men and for marriage and family, and we're disrupting everything about that. And then 4, this is the obvious one, lack of activity and chronic stress. Just the fact that we're saying children have chronic stress. I mean, the thing that stressed me out the most when I was a child is, did I get to my play date on time? I mean, chronic stress for somebody under the age of 18 is just an insane idea. And this is what tech is doing. So I think even though it's not specifically in the report, it touches on every single issue of chronic disease. And that's why it's so impactful. I think maybe we could do a better job a little bit in the MAHA movement of focusing on this, and that will be something I would like to do as part of this movement and make sure it is at the forefront, right up there with glyphosate, right up there with the food supply and the food pyramid and the food guidelines. So I do think this is a crucial part of the movement. And secondly, because of the moms. I mean, that's really what we've seen the MAHA movement be so impactful is the force of a mother's love and protection for their children.
So then maybe to summarize some of what you said, yes, go moms. We should clap more. We should clap more for the moms. So maybe to summarize what you said there, are you making the case that a great deal or almost all of the Mahal reports are either directly or indirectly stemming from screen exposure in children?
I don't know if they're stemming from, but I think they're intertwined with. And I think we could maybe do a better job with messaging. However, hopefully, and I do believe Casey Means will be confirmed on Thursday, there is not going to be a more powerful messenger than a new mother on this issue. And that, maybe they wrote that line with her in mind, that this would be one of the issues that the Surgeon General takes up. And we know that the Surgeon General really doesn't have much policy authority. They are kind of the speaking messenger of HHS, and she can be a very powerful tool in this fight against of big tech.
Absolutely. My son is 2.5 years old. I should have put in the calendar the day he was able to use my phone. 2.5, and he must have been in his first year of life. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. Dr. Dunkley, I've got another question for you. So in your clinical experience, how does recovery look like for children who undergo digital detox? How quickly do health and behavior outcomes change, and how frequent is there a relapse?
So it's actually pretty fast, and we do some preparing, but we go cold turkey. I've just learned over the years that a lot of times parents want to go slowly, and it just doesn't work. So we go cold turkey, and with younger kids, really within a couple of days, you start to see a difference in their mood and their behavior. But even for teenagers, within a week or into the second week, unless someone's really, really addicted, then it may take a few more weeks. But really by the second week, almost everybody will start to improve, and you see better eye contact, they're smiling more, their mood's better, kids will come out of their room more, they're more relaxed, they're nicer to their siblings, they start reading more. So all these things across the board, their grades can go up pretty dramatically, and their reading levels can go up within a couple months. It's very dramatic, and it improves a lot of things in a lot of different areas. But if you think about like what the screens are doing in terms of like desynchronizing the body clock, desensitizing the dopamine pathways, increasing the stress hormones, and it changes blood flow in the brain and like excitability, it changes serotonin levels, everything. So when all of that stuff normalizes, you see pretty dramatic changes.
Wonderful. Well, I think that should give us some hope.
Yes. Oh, wait, sorry. And then in terms of relapse, of course, some people will keep like abstaining longer term, especially if their child has a lot of risk factors. Other people try to reintroduce too soon, and then they kind of backslide, and then we come back to the table and sometimes do another fast, or sometimes just cut back again. But my rule of thumb is generally like whatever they're doing in that currently, they need to be doing like 10% of what they're doing currently. That's kind of like a rule of thumb that I've realized over time.
Thank you. Jennifer, back to you. My question is, how has the use of social media affected childhood wellness?
Oh, geez.
As we've seen in the previous presentation.
How hasn't it? Well, like Dr. Haidt said, he talked about the rewiring of the brain. I like to think of it as well as a rewiring of the culture in so many ways. There was a wonderful op-ed in the Washington Post by Governor Spencer Cox, what he called the consequences of America's moral drift, that consumerism, and as we've so aptly worded it, the addiction economy, because it is an addiction, just like alcohol. Like you said, what's the first step has to be acknowledging you have the problem, right? People will go in there and lie about their phone usage. I think I see myself like I don't even want to look at my screen time because I don't want to be confronted with the reality of what I've done during the day. But consumerism and the addiction economy are undermining the republic. And I don't think that's a scare tactic. I don't think that's a moral panic. I think that's true. I think we've lost as a culture things of the spirit, and this speaks to the soul part of it, that the things that once defined our culture, and Father Josiah Trenholm has recently said, and again, it sounds like an exaggeration, I don't think it is, grotesque enslavements to the passions, which are stirred by internet content, which is so seductive and so wicked. Truly, the devils have us. I think that's true. It's an upside-down world, as C.S. Lewis called it. The kind of Kardashian plastics and makeup and attire. I'm hesitant to even say it because we've probably seen it, but even the fake kind of like pubic hair that she sells, it's disgusting. Like I can't even, that's amplified on social media. The fake and the plastic, those things are amplified, and the realistic things are depressed, meaning, you know, you can now not call somebody obese because that could hurt their feelings. The actual real problems are depressed, and the fake is amplified. And then we celebrate kind of obesity now. You can't actually call it out. The whole world is inverted on social media, and so it's inverting the whole culture, particularly with girls, because I am a young lady, and not a young lady anymore, but I know the difference of what, you know, when I was younger and growing up, it was magazines of beautiful women. At least that was something to aspire to, and it was real. These were real women. Now we've got fake women that young girls are trying to aspire to that they'll never obtain. And it's the other article I read just the last weekend in Wall Street Journal was, "Girl, take your meds." It's the new social status to be on SSRIs. It's bizarre. I don't need to see data. I'm sorry, I apologize to all the clinicians around here. I don't need to see data to know that there's something wrong. And I think some of us, you know, need to be those cultural forces. Moms, it's like, I don't need to see the data. I see what's happening every day in my life. So don't tell me that, well, science, the libertarians, well, science, you know, free speech. I get a little passionate about what it's doing to our girls. You know, the fact that it's now cool to be on psych meds and the new norm, it's this whole rewiring of the culture. And this is why I think people in the Mahab movement have come to understand Callie Means, Casey's brother, has said many times, it's a spiritual battle. And I believe that's what we're facing with tech, like Father Josiah Trenholm has said. It's the devils have us.
And that seems to be a core tenet of the Maha movement, is the adherence to truthfulness. In the face of, you know, the experiences that you described, being able to say, yes, we can say something about health.
Yeah, and what it means to be human. Like, this is not these kinds of relationships. What I love about being a part of this movement, and I'm seeing some friendly faces in the audience, is there's such real connections. I feel that despite what side of the political aisle we're on, it just feels very authentic. I'm sure Jay can speak to this as well and agree with me, and Mackenzie, that whenever we're together, we're doing what we believe to be serious policy work, but it's a lot of fun, and it's based on human connection, and you know, this is why it's brought together people like me who are quasi hippies from California and homeschooling moms, and it's because it's about being human.
Yeah, and it takes a strong imagination to view technology in today's age as something that doesn't subvert that. That's why we're here. So, Dr. Dunkley, one more question for you. What level of daily screen use should public health agencies recommend as a safe upper limit for children? And is this an unhelpful way to communicate restraint?
I do find that that's unhelpful because, first of all, I think it's different for different kids. I mean, some kids, like I mentioned, really can't tolerate any at all. I mean, everybody would do better growing up with 0. But I think, to me, like, the gold standard is the way that I do it very methodically, is by, you know, having that 4-week fast and then seeing what the child can tolerate and doing it very slowly, like 15 minutes on the weekend or something like that. And then you can see, you know, some children will decompensate right away and some takes longer. But that's, you know, again, but at that point we're like, well, why are you using it at all? You know, I mean, they're going to get exposure in school no matter what. So I feel like at least the older guidelines of less than 1 to 2 hours a day, at least that was something you could point to. Now the guidelines have just totally devolved into, you know, oh, well, just make sure you get enough sleep and exercise, and there's really not much guidance at all. So to me, I always just say to every family, like, you can do your own experiment. Do this first, see what changes you see. You don't have to believe me. Do it yourself, and then go from there.
Thank you. That's very instructive. Jennifer, another question. If you were designing a federal wellness strategy, how would screen time reduction be integrated alongside the other pieces like nutrition and exercise?
Jay, maybe we should put it in the food guidelines. It really is. Who mentioned it? We take it. It's something we take in. It's something that either nourishes us or poisons us. So I am not the clinical person. I don't know the technical, how much time it should be, but I do believe that maybe it should be treated as we treat the food guidelines of something that we're taking into our body that is going to either nourish us or poison us.
And I don't see any of it nourishing. I think all of it is like junk food. So is there a safe amount of junk food? I mean, the best answer is that you shouldn't have any junk food. But so to me, like there's no safe level.
I would say that with social media, but isn't China using it as their version of TikTok is like National Geographic? It might be nourishing on some level with restrictions of age limits. I do watch a lot of spiritual conversation. Now I'm an adult, but I watch a lot of spiritual conversations on YouTube. Maybe we can feed that to our kids. I don't know. Again, I'm not the clinical person. For the most part, I see mostly junk I'm not on TikTok, so I can't say if there's any usefulness for that. But I do think we need to look at, that's where I would look at the data. That's not me, but I would say we should consider it as food, as nourishment.
Yeah.
Or not.
As an exposure.
Or not.
As an
Yeah.
exposure.
I mean, it is true that China, by their actions, they recognize what's at risk in their technological products and what's being put in front of their children. They do a massive amount of control on that. We do not view the human person the same way as the Chinese Communist Party does, and we shouldn't. But they recognize the threat, and we should too. All right, Dr. Dunkley, one more question, and then I'm going to throw some questions to to the rest of the panel. Dr. Dunkley, let's talk about junk food. You have covered how the psychological effects of screen abuse are they're independent of what kids are actually consuming, just the number of hours as opposed to what's in front of them. But let's talk about what is in front of them. I'm curious, how frequent are your patients suffering from exposure to porn at an early age or dependence on AI products like chatbots for their social and emotional well-being? And what conclusions do you draw about these conditions?
I think, in my experience, and I'm sure, you guys agree as well from Screen Strong, the kids are getting exposed younger and younger. People often throw out that number that, by the time children are 12, like 1 in 3 has already been exposed to porn. But every time I give a talk, somebody raises their hand during the Q&A, someone says, my 6-year-old just got exposed in the classroom. This just happened at my son's school, and it was with first and second graders. And we have a phone-free school, by the way. It still happened in the after-school program. So it's extremely common. And then what I'm seeing with the young men is that the porn addiction is so prevalent, it's unbelievable. And so we spend a lot of time trying to unwind that whole thing, and that takes a lot of people involved, a lot of resources just to turn that around. So I think it's extremely common, and I think it's next level, like the addiction piece of the porn and like the constant stimulation and how it's really hijacking all of the sexual drives and instinctual things. It's really like heroin. So I think being able to have conversations with parents about like how addictive it is and how it changes the brain, it does, interestingly, the effects, the imaging studies looking at porn, video games, and social media, it all looks very similar. So the brains are less connected, and there's atrophy of the gray matter. And all three are, all associated with changes in depression and anxiety and lower relational abilities.
Yeah, and if we can't unite to be against porn, what are we doing here? Do you have any comments on anything you've seen in your clinical practice regarding AI use and dependency?
I think maybe because I have, by the time they get to me, they have somebody, and also probably have a therapist too. But I'm not seeing as many kids personally that are using like the chat bots. What I'm seeing more is the cheating in school and just using AI. Kids are exhausted, and then they go to AI to solve all their problems. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Is like this dependency on it from that way, and they can't even they know it. They don't want to be doing it. They're tired, so they just use it.
Yeah. I would draw the audience's attention to the case of Adam Raines, who started by using an AI product for homework, and it ended up enabling his suicide. So, read it. Let's go to the rest of our panel. Michael, Annie, you've been very patient with me. Michael, as our token technologist on the panel, what do you see as the most alarming or urgent harms that the public underestimates here?
Thanks, Wes. Dr. Haidt used a word, citizenship. And citizenship is really at the core of what we talk about at the Center for Responsible Technology. We consider these harms to be a national security threat. What do I mean like that? I'm going to draw some lines. Due to the growing amounts of screen time following the Great Rewiring that you just saw with Dr. Haidt, kids are not exercising, they're not socializing, they're not sleeping, they're not reading, right? This is a recipe for a national disaster. Let me give you my math. So anxious, lonely, addicted, exhausted kids turned into anxious, lonely, addicted, exhausted adults. These adults are, by the way, they're not dating, they're not forming families and procreating. Everything is going south. And so these are our future citizens, right? These are the people that are going to have to make the hard decisions when the rest of us die out. And so this impacts GDP. This impacts our military prowess, international competitiveness, innovation, you name it. All of these things rely on inventors and doctors and legislators and people that have been shaped by real world learning. And so, a lot of this discourse comes back to, we got to beat China, right? The nation's report card just came out last week or 2 weeks ago. Lowest scores in the history of measurement, right? And so my question for everybody is, what's the point of winning a race if you have nobody to hand the baton to at the end of the day? And so from my view, we've got to take this real world, real people learning seriously. Otherwise, we're going to kiss our great nation goodbye. So I don't think the public fully realizes the magnitude of the crisis.
Can I just jump in here really quick?
Yeah.
Bouncing off of that, there are political ramifications to this too. As Dr. Haidt pointed out, you have a generation that feels that their life is meaningless. And when people feel their life is meaningless, they are more likely to vote for a Zoran Mandami that says, we are going to give your life meaning. And that's how we have, they're pointing to a lot of, it's because of immigration that these people are voting that way in New York, but it's also a lot of young people that feel despondent and that their life doesn't have meaning. Well, we're going to give you stuff, and maybe that'll give you life meaning. So I just wanted to kind of jump on that and say it has real world political ramifications as well.
And I think when that meaning disappears, they're lonely again, right?
Yeah. Well, you're not going to find a conservative message that says you will find yourself through politics. Wonderful. Thank you. And Michael, are you making the case that my poorly spent years in my 20s on video games didn't prepare me for the military or to be an astronaut?
I was going to say they may have prepared you to speak on this panel or moderate the panel, but no. I mean, I have the same background. Played video games for very many years, and I don't look back on it with necessarily regret. There are much worse things I could have done with my time. But there are also tremendously better things I could have done with my time, right?
No, I can't echo that comment enough. And I've even told my team the other day that I have more hours on Steam than all of them combined, and it is a big regret of mine. All right, well, speaking of which, Annie, and question for both Annie and Michael is, which policy tools, now you described it some, which policy tools look most promising to you for actually curbing childhood screen addiction? And Annie, let's start with you.
Yeah, well, Dr. Haidt and fellow panelists have made it clear that we are in a crisis and parents need help. And yes, we have a growing consensus, fortunately, about delaying phones and delaying social media. But as some of the analogies that Dr. Haidt shared. We aren't just saying, hey, let's gather together and let's collectively decide we're going to delay giving our kids alcohol, or we're going to delay letting them drive. Like we also do need laws, and these companies do need to be held accountable. And so I think they're kind of two different ways to go about it. I think one is cutting off access, and the other is changing the design systems and putting restrictions on what sort of design features can be allowed for services, platforms that kids can interface with. So there's a growing consistency with age verification online, because we have that in the real world, the physical world. Kids can't go into most bars. Usually have to be 18 or 21, or can't go into a strip club or an adult video store. But there's been a loophole online, and porn is at their fingertips, and now it's becoming even more accessible. It's not just the pornography websites, but on social media, they've found creative ways to like OnlyFans and other adult actors to start posting some content on social media to entice users to go to their external page. So to date, 25 states have passed laws requiring age verification for online pornography websites. We had a huge win this summer when the Supreme Court upheld Texas's age verification law, and saying that it did not violate First Amendment rights, and that adults do not have a First Amendment right to avoid age verification. So with this, we have the pathway to bring this nationwide, because we need it in all 50 states and ultimately need a federal solution. And then with design features, the Kids Online Safety Act that I think was mentioned earlier, so that is putting limitations and telling social media platforms that they cannot use addictive and deceptive design features for accounts for minors, for kids. So these types of features, like the recommendation-based algorithms and the endless feeds, the push notifications, likes, and those are all like dopamine triggers for that quick pleasure. And again, like this bill, it's not about what people are posting, but it's about the algorithm, how it preys on the user's psychology and feeds content based on their previous browser history, views, likes, to keep them on the platform for as long as possible. And then we also have App Store age verification, and the App Store Accountability Act, and this is requiring apps to require parental consent for kids to download, and so just send a notification to the parent saying, okay, your child wants to download Instagram, yes or no. And this is, I'd say, a great policy that is putting parents more in the driver's seat, and so that they are actually having more of a technological means to have a say in what their child's online experience is. Because it can't otherwise, if it's just only about, okay, well, don't let them have a phone, don't let them have social media, then it's kind of all or nothing. And so when they are actually on these platforms, there needs to be ways for parents to say yes or no, and to have a say in the settings for their child's account.
Thank you, Annie. And Michael, is there any policy that you would point to as something that you appreciate?
Yeah, I mean, everything Annie said, App Accountability Act, 100%, bell-to-bell bans in schools, 100%. I would tack on a couple of, small ideas here. Senator Hawley just came out with a bill yesterday, heavily restricting, attacking the use of chatbots with minors. I would say that something really simple that we could do tomorrow, that I feel like almost everybody would agree to, would be removing the first-person perspective, the I and the me, from chatbots. Besides providing marketing, I lost you. Besides providing marketing attention and getting people sucked in and lured and addicted to these programs, it doesn't actually have any benefit. You mentioned Adam Rain a couple of minutes ago. Like the chatbot said he was preparing his noose, and it said, "You're not invisible. I see you. You know, you matter to me." Those are sick and twisted things that should never be said to a kid or to adult, right? And so, you know, I would codify that in state policy or federal policy tomorrow. These companies wouldn't like it, but it would be very simple and very effective. The other thing I want to talk about is we have to find more ways for parents to wholesale opt out of these harms. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Thank you, Dr. Haidt, for the elevation of this issue. Parents are waking up to social media. They're waking up to smartphones, particularly in schools. But there's still a lot of other areas they're struggling in, right? They're struggling in schools. They're struggling to get ed tech and still screens out of schools. They're struggling to get them out of libraries, restaurants. I mean, there's even screens in gas stations now, right? It's crazy. I can't even hear myself think at a gas station when I'm pumping the gas. And so, you know, I think sitting here speaking at the Heritage Foundation, we're speaking for my own organization. I'm not saying that all of you guys need to have screen-free childhoods and education for all your kids, but this is America. You should have the freedom to achieve that if you want that for your child, right? And so, again, we need to codify ways for parents to opt out and say there has to be an alternative path, even if it's not the mainstream one. Yeah, go ahead.
And I think a lot of times schools or districts have opt-out options, but they're not advertised because Google or whoever, gives them language to present to the school so that everybody opts in, and no one's ever told they can opt out.
Right. And the last piece I would add is we have to find more opportunities to bring these big tech companies to court. Give parents more options to litigate.
Great point. Great point. Now, I think what we've seen today so far with this event is Dr. Haidt and so far with this panel demonstrating the grievous harm that's being done today. And now from these last couple of questions, I'm hearing these solutions, which looking at the harm and looking at the solutions, these seem like pretty modest things that we're asking for. That children shouldn't be exposed to pornography, that they shouldn't be exposed to virtual algorithms that are simulating relationship and replacing the relationships in their lives. The list can go on, but it seems like, would your message be to industry is saying, these are modest attempts, modest things that we can do to make that possible for more families, to make it more possible for families to opt out. Is that a proper characterization of it?
I mean, I would say that the problem is the anthropomorphization, the personalization of the chatbots itself. That's a feature. That's not a bug, right? And so you're taking away their main way to convince people and lure them into a sense of security, into relation, right? It's not relation at all. But take that away, and it's Google, right? I mean, it's a better Google. It's a faster Google, I'll admit that. But what's left there if it doesn't give the allure of a relationship?
Yeah.
I think the marketing disappears.
Maybe the 2 cents is, if you do not like the modest measures, be afraid of what comes next. As we experience more and more of these harms if there's not correction. But I'm editorializing. I'm the moderator. Let's get back to the questions. So the next question I have is for you, Annie. Do the harms we've discussed about social media and screen use extend to AI? We've covered some of that. But what are some of the unique problems of AI that contribute to problematic screen use? Zone in on that more from our discussion here.
Yes, they do. So first, with social media, the algorithm is so powerful because it uses AI, and that is how it is very quickly recommending and curating content to each user based on their likes and their preferences and their behavior on the platform. So that already has been existing, and that is what it keeps users hooked. But I think where AI, more like generative AI, is different with like the AI chatbots is the engagement. It is engaging back with you. It's not just very sophisticatedly serving you content. It's having like a relationship with you and using the natural language, responding, asking you more questions. And this is really concerning with kids because, I mean, as their brains are still developing, and so even if they're told it's a chatbot, I think it's very easy to forget that and for them to feel like they're developing this emotional bond, especially as texting, direct messaging, DMing is more how kids are communicating anyway. So with most of their friends, it's all chatting anyway. So it's really no different than if they're chatting with a chat bot. It's not like the chat bot is where they type, but everyone else, they're on the phone. Unfortunately, they aren't doing phone calls anymore. So I think it's the level of engagement that AI has and that how it's able to kind of like replicate human type of engagement that is what is more concerning.
Thank you. And it's 2025, so I'm obligated to ask several AI questions. Thank you for your forbearance. One more for you, Michael. What are some of the concerning or hopeful thoughts you have about AI that you haven't already covered?
I mean, so I agree with everything Annie just said, but I'm going to try to take a shot at the hopeful. How about that? Which is hard to do. A lot of ink has been spilled on the concerns, right? Let's talk about the hopeful for a second. At the height of COVID, the Holy Father offered an invocation, and I'm not going to read it, but his prayer was, "The storm exposes our vulnerabilities that we have." And so his point that he's making there is often when things are really, really bad, we start to uncover the things that have been broken for a long time, right? And so I've been saying this about LLMs for a pretty long time, that we're finally starting to ask questions about that brokenness, right? So take education, for example. I think for the very first time, thanks to chatbots and plagiarism, we're really starting to ask hard questions about what writing is, what learning is. I'll tell a quick story. There's a school nearby here, very prestigious, very good, private boys' school. And they were experiencing this plagiarism like rampant. And so they said, okay, we're going to go away from word processing. We're going to bring in the blue books, if anybody ever remembers blue books. We're going to write essays in class. And so that's a great idea until they found out pretty quickly that they didn't know how to write anymore, right? And so it's a bit of a sad story, but I'm hopeful because now that's a conversation, right? Now we're looking at, well, how are we teaching writing? How are we teaching comprehension? If they lack those basic skills. The other piece that I'm hopeful for is there's a lot of people playing with, I call them toys because they're entertainment value, a lot of people playing with these chatbot toys who are suddenly realizing that the transcribed internet is pretty wrong. Like anybody who uses Gemini at the top of Google, you're like, that's not what I was looking for, or that's not the right answer, or that's not even the right word, right? And the phrase artificial intelligence, I always say to people, is an oxymoron. Aristotle and the Greeks talked about intelligence as the facility to prioritize and organize the highest goods. Chatbots don't understand what is a high good or a low good or any kind of good, right? It's just a very good next word guesser, right? And so I think if you're talking to the smartest people, and by the way, the smartest people are not the marketers. If you're talking to the smartest people, look at Goldman Sachs just this week came out with a report, and they said, hey, by the way, that whole thing about AI stealing jobs kind of was an exaggeration, at least in the banking sector, right? These guys know what's going to steal their bottom line, and Americans are rightly suspicious of this technology. So I'm just very hopeful that a lot of this is just uncovering a rot that we've been sitting on since the Great Rewiring.
Yeah, and I mean, to your note of optimism, you know, in covering this, we offer a great deal. We're saying scrutinize its effects on children, scrutinize child exposure. We should acknowledge that there are tremendous positive uses for technology and AI in particular that ought to be pursued, employed, deployed, at the very least to make sure that we do it and China doesn't. But that does not take apart the argument that you've presented that we need to pass our country, we need to pass the baton to someone when we win. That's an excellent point. The next question I have is for you, Annie. In talking about this scrutiny and exposure for children, my question is there evidence, and what is that evidence, that social media platforms and online companies are intentionally doing this, engineering addiction for children?
Yeah, I think with the like dopamine triggers, so the rewards and notifications that you get on platforms. So recently, Grok, so X, formerly Twitter, X now, Grok is the AI platform. They came out with a few AI companions, and one of them is this like female anime character. And as like a reward, for positive engagement with her, she starts removing clothing. So I think that's one piece of evidence. And I think maybe it was mentioned earlier, but it was uncovered that Meta, to train its AI llama, it scraped 82,000 gigabytes of material from pornography websites to train its material. And why? Because like pornography is addictive. And so that's something to keep users engaged. So yeah, I think that is the evidence that we have. And there's, you've got the recommendation-based algorithm. And I think also just the evidence of how the data of how long people are spending online and the compulsive usage. Why else are people have screen times of 8+ hours a day? It's because they're addicted. And that is a design of their features, because the longer a user is engaged, the more money that they have. So these the platforms, a lot of them are free, but the user is the product, and they are getting their revenue through our use.
And perhaps I'm repeating myself a little bit because of Dr. Haidt's excellent presentation talking about the tens of thousands of internal documents that have circulated, giving evidence to this problem. Thank you for your answer. Michael, perhaps a question that summarizes this, puts a good landing point for this. You have plenty of experience developing and deploying tech. What is the place for technology in childhood?
So I've always said that discovery was the one great fruit of the internet. And what do I mean by discovery? The ability to quickly find, get access to information, and potentially learn something, right? So like, I don't know, it's clogging your toilet or fixing a pipe or something like that. You can watch a YouTube video pretty quickly. Not only does that apply to information, it also applies to relationship, right? You can find people to help you. As you said, I'm a technologist, and I've done that for a really long time, but I went to school for political philosophy, okay? So I wasn't properly educated in any of the stuff that I've done in my career. All of that was given to me, again, by the fruits of discovery, by the fruits of the internet, free resources, people who really cared to teach me. And so, I would say access to different books, curriculum, learning styles has been a huge boon for educators, for the homeschool community. Again, these are just resources that you wouldn't have had if not for the internet, right? If it wasn't in your community, if you didn't know about it, if you weren't in those circles or in those clubs, you wouldn't have access to that, right? But this availability and access of information, to my mind, still has to be monitored or called administered by parents and educators, right? Because neurologists, and you can please correct me if I'm wrong, neurologists talk about receptivity in education, right? The brain is really good at deleting tons of information that's unnecessary to the moment, to life, and otherwise, right? We get rid of a lot of garbage. The brain has to be receptive to learning something. You can't there's not just information you plug in and it goes in there, right? And so education's not information, it's not job skills, It's none of these things. It's not data. It's a relationship with a human being that cultivates the humanity of that child or adult and shapes them into a citizen. And so, I think it's got to be about receptivity. It's got to be about using these tools wisely to find the right information, right? But deploying them with kids is, again, an adult choice. It's not a kid choice to just decide how much information I just want to consume and ingest. So I would say discovery for sure.
Thank you. That's an excellent way to think about it. Annie, I have to flatter you a little bit. Just today, you published a report on a survey the Heritage Foundation commissioned, asking parents about their and their children's experience using online filters and blocking software. Can you tell us about some of the results of that survey and why it's important to this discussion?
Yeah, well, this survey was something I wanted to do for a while because last year, as I was researching age verification and writing about it and making the case for why it was a good policy solution for like online pornography and then even social media, and then particularly with online pornography. So as had to make a compelling case for why we should be adding additional regulations, additional requirements. And of course, some of the pushback is, well, we have filters and blocking technology. Like, if surely that's advanced and is stronger, and do we just need more people to do that? But the findings of just how many kids were exposed to pornography were so high. I mean, like 80% of teenagers have come across it, at least from like one study. 50% actively seek it out, and 40% of little kids have come across it. So then the question is like, okay, so are people just not using filters? And is that like we just need more people to use it, or are they just really not working? So we did this study. We had 1,001 parents who participated, and who also, these parents, I think everyone that was moved from the selection criteria to actually doing it, they all said that they used filters or blocking technology. And what we found is, still that there is a lot of problems, and that they aren't perfect. They definitely, they help, but there is still a lot of gaps where they fail. So 50% of parents said that the filtering blocking software rarely worked or only worked some of the time. 50% of parents also said that, that their kids had access to devices that don't have filters in place. So whether it's maybe the parents' devices that aren't protected, or at a friend's house, or at school. About 20% said that their kid had unintentionally accessed obscene content while a filter was in place. And 15% said that they intentionally accessed it while there's some sort of filter in place. 2/3 of parents also said that filters overblock. So it could be about like medical treatment, searching information about relationships, or like drugs and alcohol. So things that like out of context, and maybe the filter thinks should be blocked, but maybe in other contexts it actually wasn't really inappropriate. And so that also can just be irritating, and it can lead to parents disabling it and then forgetting to turn it back on. And we also did ask questions about screen usage, and we found, sadly, very high rates, very like compulsive usage, and a correlation, like parents that spend a lot of time online have kids that spend a lot of time online. And so that kind of shows the importance of like modeling behavior. So 82% of parents said that they spend between 4 and 12 hours a day online during the week, and 70% spend that much time on the weekends. And the kids were, wasn't quite the same percentage, but still, in my book, a high number. The parents said that at least 53% of their kids were spending at least 4 hours to over 12 hours a day online during the week, and 62% spend that much more on the weekend. So I think this survey is online. There's a lot more. We have a lot of charts and graphs showcasing their findings, and I think ultimately it goes to show that even parents who they think they have all the parental controls, all the like filters, and some of these parents were even paying like upwards of $70 a month for the type of software they're using to try to filter and block certain websites. There's still gaps in that, and that's why we need additional measures like some of the ones I mentioned earlier.
I was just going to say, anecdotally, it makes a lot of common sense. I'm a father of 5 kids, right? Whenever I meet a new parent with a new baby and they tell me, I don't think I'm going to baby-proof my house. I think I'm just going to watch the kid really, really closely. And I laugh because they're in for a rude awakening, right? Monitoring never works. If you're a parent, you know monitoring never works. And so I think it just makes common sense that it doesn't matter what you throw at it. Kids, life finds a way, right?
Yeah, and it's worth acknowledging that no one is rushing to the microphone to say safety tools online or solve the problem. Glad that they exist, but let's keep our expectations straight. All right, next question here. Well, actually, I should acknowledge, if you would like to offer a question from the audience, if you'd like to offer a question, you can email publicprograms@heritage.org to present your question. But next for one of my own, Dr. Dunkley, let's go back to you. What, listening to this conversation, what misconceptions do policymakers or parents have about the science of screen use that you think need to be corrected in order for them to craft effective policies?
I think one of the main things is I always hear, oh, if you just eliminate screens an hour before bedtime, then they'll be protected. I hear that all the time, and that it's helpful, but it doesn't protect them necessarily, or even close, bare minimum. Yeah. Another one is the content thing, like, oh, it just matters what they're doing as long as they're doing something educational, then it's okay. I hear that all the time too. And as we've discussed, all of these things, like, to me, the content doesn't matter that much. It doesn't make that much difference. And all of these platforms and the software and everything and the device themselves is designed to pull you back in. So that's another big one. And I think also people, to me, the interactive screen time is a lot more dysregulating because it's more stimulating and more engaging. So that's another big one that ed tech uses all the time is this is how we keep the children engaged. We'll make it more interesting and interactive. And we know that from research as well, that interactive has more effect on sleep, it has more effect on mood and cognition the following day.
Excellent. Thank you. Jennifer, a question for you. Where do you see natural allies among health organizations and tech policy advocates to move this forward? Put on your coalition's hat for a moment to say, how do folks work together to be effective here?
We'll definitely pull in all the MAHA people and the mothers. I mean, that is the force that we have seen push kind of MAHA out. There's a lot of moms in Congress, like knocking on doors, making phone calls, writing letters, now getting involved in drafting policy. It is the epitome of what it means to be a democratic republic, to have the people run the government and not the other way around. The other thing I'll say, I'm going to put on my Charlie Kirk hat for a moment, is call on churches. I feel like yes, tech is shaping us, but we're also vulnerable because of this perversion of sex, as we see in pornography, and the sexual culture, as we see in kind of the Kardashian culture, that girls are attracted to. And what we haven't touched on is how this kind of, we kind of touched on it, but how this degrades family formation, which we know is the foundation of healthy and flourishing societies, and something Heritage is very much focused on in this new year coming up. And every time I see this guy, Jeffrey Marsh, pop up on social media, he freaks me out. And we are feeding these kids this transgender ideology and perverting normal, healthy sexual relationships between men and women and destroying families. And I think if churches don't play a role in this, if they don't somehow, I understand where churches are like, well, that's not our job. Well, you cannot, I don't think we're in a position in this day and age to remove morality from policy and legislation and our everyday life. That may have held true before when we were a religious society. I think we need to bring a little bit of that into the forefront, call on churches, call on civic organizations and communities to really bring this back into public life, and what a healthy sexual relationship is, what a healthy marriage is, what it means to date and court. And it seems so archaic in this day and age, and it seems so Luddite, but I just feel like churches have a bigger role in all of this cultural formation than we're asking them to play.
Hey, if we can lean on the Maha movement, bring in the churches, take leadership in our own families and communities, there's a lot of work to do and a lot to be hopeful for. So would you please join me in thanking this panel for their terrific remarks? On behalf of the Heritage Foundation, thank you all for joining us for this conversation. Please be encouraged to lead in your families and communities to demand a better outcome for our kids. Thank you, and please join us for a reception in the lobby as you entered. Thank you.